Hi, my name is Mike Boms. I teach biology here at SUNY New Paltz. What I'm going to talk to you today is about the American diet and the rise of diabetes. There were three important statements that came out from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, about a couple of years ago that are very pertinent to this discussion and to the welfare of Americans. The first statement made was that by the year 2050, two-thirds of all Americans will be diabetic. That's only 32 years from now. So you got to think about, if you had 32 years to your life right now, you could be one of those two-thirds that has diabetes. The second statement made was that there are more people dying today of obesity-related diseases than of malnutrition and of starvation. And the third statement they made was that we are overfed but undernourished. These are three important statements here, and they really speak a lot, volume, about what is going on in the American diet. First of all, we talk about the rise of diabetes. Diabetes mellitus means sweet urine. And what this basically is that the inability of the body to absorb and take in glucose. Glucose is the end product of carbohydrate digestion. Now, we've all played with sugar when we were younger and how sticky they were. And what they do is they actually cause the blood to become very sticky inside our blood vessels, especially down by the capillaries, which are one cell thick. Every single cell of our body is fed by the capillaries. So what happens basically is that if we have a lot of sugar in our blood, glucose in our blood becomes very sticky, you start getting blood clots. And all the vessels, therefore, start narrowing. And all the cells that are fed by those vessels begin to die. So we start seeing people with diabetes. What happens basically is they start losing eyesight, they start losing toes, fingers, amputations follow, and so forth. Now, what the purpose of diabetes is that we have a hormone called insulin produced by the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas. And the goal of that is to make all the cells take in glucose from the blood and store it either as glycogen or as fats. Now, there are three types of diabetes. The first diabetes is diabetes 1 or juvenile diabetes. Some call this to be an autoimmune disorder, which probably it is. It is somehow triggered by some sort of an environmental trigger that causes antibodies to be produced in the body that attack the pancreas. In diabetes 1, you're not making enough insulin. So the way we contact that and correct that is by just giving pushes of insulin, injections of insulin daily or as needed going through. And this is for the lifetime. And plus, these children, actually with diabetes 1, is called juvenile diabetes. These have to be treated also by diets, more or less. The second one is diabetes 2. And this is called latent onset diabetes. And this happens to people 40 years or older with a really poor diet. And what happens basically is that we are producing a lot of insulin. But instead of these cells taking in the glucose and converting to fat and so forth, they do nothing like that. So the way we treat people with diabetes 2 is by diets. What we're seeing right now is that we are seeing this adult onset diabetes on children as young as 10 years of age. This is horrible because the outcome of diabetes 2 is exactly like diabetes 1. And the thing is, though, if you ever go to a doctor and you ask them about diabetes 2 in young children, I guarantee that doctor is going to break out in a cold sweat because there is no really cure for this. What we do right now is we give these children, these adults, whatever, who need it, more insulin in the hopes that the extra push of insulin will do the trick. The third type of diabetes is called gestational diabetes, and this happens with pregnant women. And usually what happens is once the pregnancy is terminated for whatever reason, that person will come back to be a normal person in a sense. So when we talk about diabetes and so forth, this is what happens. If we look at a place like Japan prior to World War II, in the Japanese language, there really wasn't a word for diabetes. After World War II, when they adopted the American diet, more or less, diabetes became rampant. We now look at, for example, at Michelle Obama's Let's Move program. And what it is basically is a miscalculation, is a misspoken words and dialect about this thing. And what this is basically is they talk about calories in and calories out. What they're talking about, you counter all the calories you take in by eating, and from eating, by exercising. Well, this is a fallacy because if you eat, like for example, 10 calories of white bread, all right, white bread, what happens basically is pure starch, which means the digestion is so simple and so quick that you're going to get a rush of sugars into the blood almost immediately. And here you get a spike in insulin, and the sugar is then converted back into fats and back into glycogen. All right. Now, if you take, for example, 10 calories of whole wheat bread, which contains bran, contains more nutrients, more B vitamins, and more fiber, it takes a long time to digest. And you get slightly smaller spillover of sugar into the blood. And now what happens is insulin is not utilized. Insulin is the fat-producing hormone, and you start getting more energy coming that way, not being stored as fat. So we start seeing that this misnomer, this whole thing talking about calories in, calories out is really not a good thing. You have things like Coca-Cola fostering let's move, giving money, saying that the cure to diabetes is by more exercising, the cure to obesity is by more exercising. And what we're seeing right now is that that's not really true. And if you look at Michelle Obama, when she talks about the Let's Move program, it's not the program she wanted when she first started. What she wanted to do basically is to have a better nutrition, and she was thwarted by her husband, actually, who told her not to speak so loudly because these are his constituents. The other outcome we have is this thing called high fructose corn syrup. It comes from corn. Corn is subsidized in this country by millions and millions of dollars, billions in fact. And what we have done now, we have actually allowed farmers to grow as much corn as they want, and they can do whatever they want with it. They can reconfigure it to whatever. One of the things they reconfigure to is high fructose corn syrup. And it's just as bad. Sugar is bad, but high fructose corn syrup is the worst of the two. The reason being is when you talk about sucrose, table sugar, 55% is glucose, 45% is fructose. The glucose is metabolized in the cells, the fructose is metabolized inside the liver. When you have high fructose corn syrup, you're having 55% fructose and 45% glucose. And what happens basically is that you start getting more metabolization inside the liver as opposed to somewhere else, and you start getting damage to the liver. And one of the nasty things about high fructose corn syrup, in your stomach, when your stomach is bloated and full, it produces a hormone called leptin, which goes to the hypothalamus and tells you that you're full and you stop eating. High fructose corn syrup does not do that. And so therefore what's happening basically is you're eating more and more and more, and therefore you start getting overweight and obesity. In this country right now, 1/3 of all Americans are obese, 1/3 of all Americans are overweight, and only 1/3 of Americans are lean. 3 years ago, the U.S. was the most obese country in the world. A year later, Mexico became the most obese country in the world. We were number 2. But as number 2, what do? You try harder. The year after that, we became number 1 again. And if we don't do something about our diets very shortly and so forth, we're all going to be sick. There's 2 mantras that I live by, and that is, you take care of your body right now. It will take care of you later on. And the second one is, the idea is not to live longer. The idea is to live younger longer. Thank you.